So you mean to tell me for 23 years he had food poisoning and not the flu? What are you saying to me right now? Listen to me. Listen, when I tell you that the revelation that he had food poisoning and not the flu in this game, when I tell you that was the biggest shocker to me in those 10 episodes of The Last Dance, I am not kidding you one bit. Listen, what? 23 years. That's like the biggest, and it's not that he wasn't sick in the game. Of course, he was sick. 38 points, and of course, Scotty had to carry him off. He was sick. He was weak. That's not even the point. We thought he had the flu. And if you're young enough, you don't realize that, okay, flu versus food poisoning, what's the big deal? No, that's like a big part of culture. It's like a big myth now. And the way Mike told us that in episode 10, he just threw that in there so casually. He said, I know everybody thought I had the flu, but it was bad. I got food poisoning from bad pizza the night before. He threw that in there so casually, like as if he didn't realize that this is a big part of like sports allure for the last 23 years. Food poisoning, not the flu. So then what is this? What are these? Are these the food poison 12s? Like, I got so many questions, man. I don't know where to go from here. Is it the food poison game? Or is it the food poisoning game? Oh my goodness. But you know what this documentary has done? It's given younger players like the green light to almost like downplay Mike's greatness. Like, this is Channing Frye, who he's basically saying if Mike were playing today, nobody would want to play with him because he's ball dominant, and what he's doing now, what he did back then, will not win championships in today's NBA. And Channing Frye is 37 years old, so I feel like he should know better. Like, Channing Frye is old enough to have seen Mike, like when Channing was in high school, like old enough to have seen Mike when he was mature enough to realize this is good basketball versus bad basketball. Not like he's 22 and never saw Mike play. So I'm surprised by this, but I understand where he's coming from, because like the closest thing we've seen to Mike since Mike, of course, was Kobe. And if you remember those years shortly after Shaq left LA, when Kobe was shooting everything he got, like, guys didn't really want to play with him. That was the word around the league. So I kind of understand where he's coming from, but I feel like it's really giving, not just Channing, I don't want to pick on just Channing Frye, but it's giving other guys the green light to come out and almost like downplay and diminish Jordan's greatness. And that's the one thing, the one takeaway from this thing, the one, result that I'm not really feeling. And I like the Steve Kerr segment in episode 10. I like how they spend time talking about, Steve and his relationship with Mike and the similarities that they have, regarding their fathers. But that aside, talking about just basketball, and Steve Kerr seems like he's a really good dude. He seems like he's a very nice, humble guy. He seems like a great guy. But the thing I find funny about the whole Steve Kerr part in the documentary was that when Mike and Steve got into that fight in practice, Mike said that Steve elbowed him in the chest and Mike punched him in the face. And Steve's takeaway from that was that I earned Mike's respect because that told him I wouldn't back down from him. Like, listen, I don't know where he's from, but listen, getting punched in the face, like, I don't want anybody's respect that much where it would take them punching me in the face. I don't know if that's gaining the respect of Mike or whatever you call it, but it worked for them. Steve hit some big shots in those finals, and the rest is history. But you know what I would have loved? I would have loved to have seen some guys from, during that era in the documentary that weren't. Like, guys who I wanted to see were like Joe Dumars. I wanted to hear Joe Dumars speak. I wanted to hear Bill Laimbeer speak. I really wanted to hear John Stark speak. Like Karl Malone. Like, some of those guys, that would have been good to hear them speak. I would imagine they were offered the opportunity to and they didn't want to. And I understand, if I were in their shoes, I probably wouldn't want to speak about that either. But what this documentary didn't do, it did not end the Jordan versus LeBron debate. It didn't do that. And the interesting thing about this whole documentary to me is why Jordan decided to do it, because he obviously greenlit the camera crew followed him around during that entire 97-98 season because he knew it was the last dance, and he thought at that point eventually he may do a documentary, he may want to turn it into a story. But that's 22 years ago, right? Why did it take him so long to release it? Did you realize that the day Mike decided to turn that footage into a documentary was the day that the Cavs had their parade for the 2016 championship? The day LeBron, brought the title to Cleveland and they celebrated it with the parade in Cleveland, that's the day Mike said, yes, gather up all that footage and let's make a documentary. I don't think that's a coincidence. Mike knows he's in a two-man race with LeBron for the GOAT championship, the GOAT crown, if you will, him versus LeBron. Listen, if you think that's a coincidence, the day because LeBron won in that championship in Cleveland, it gave him a few extra points in the GOAT debate. And so Mike's chess move to that was, you know what? All right, let me release this documentary. So that debate is going to go on forever. It was a good documentary. Now, after all this is said and done, I'm left wondering with no sports. Now what do we do? You know what I'm going to do in this time? I'm going to figure out if they're called the food poisons or the food poisonings.